Call us to order. Welcome to our March 4th meeting. Hopefully everyone has had the opportunity to take a look at the minutes from our previous meeting. Does anyone have any additions or edits? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to accept. Thank you. May I have a second, please? All in favor of accepting the minutes, please raise your hands. Perfect. Minutes carry. And now I will turn it over to Board Member Younger to give kind of a report out on a recent trip that a couple of our folks made.
Thank you. The first week of February, the Inspector General and I went to Anchorage, Alaska for approximately 4 days. And this was a trip, this was a meeting of the Black Caucus. And they are in the process of wanting to start a civilian police review board and an office of the Inspector General there. And so they wanted someone who already has one operating successfully to speak. And so we had the opportunity, we met some really great people, and we had the opportunity on Friday to speak with their assembly. So we both, at this particular function, this was really good because they had many, many questions, and I believe that the Inspector General also got more questions subsequent to our visit. We had a nice little presentation. She had one for the Inspector General, and I had a brief little thing regarding the Civilian Review Board, and they were just cutting our time, and because they wanted to ask questions and get down to the nitty-gritty. And so the assembly is like our city council. So then in the afternoon, we had the opportunity to meet with their police chief, who is very progressive, and the Inspector General had an opportunity to really speak with him and address his concerns. And then on Saturday, the Inspector General had an opportunity to present, and she made a wonderful presentation to the Black Caucus, and this was also an expo, so we had an opportunity to speak with individuals and answer their questions. And then we started our trip back after that. And it was a wonderful opportunity to meet with them, and most of the city council was very pro Civilian Police Review Board because they've had some incidences there. And we were able to answer their questions, and I think it felt, not being biased, it felt like it was a very successful trip. So thank you for allowing me to speak. You might want to add something too, Inspector General.
The only thing I would add that I will say that I really appreciate the invitation and the fact that, I want to thank Board Member Younger for attending, because I think it's important that when agencies reach out or governments reach out and they want to get information about the Department of Inspector General and the board, that there is a board member there that can speak on the challenges and the success of the board. So just really want to say that Ms. Younger definitely presented a lot of information, and they had a lot of questions that she was able to answer. So it was a great opportunity. Thanks.
Well, thank you both for attending and being willing to answer questions. I'm sure that was both exciting as a new board, relatively new, but also neat to see a city that is trying to do the same thing. So thank you very much.
Want to go to Anchorage?
My invite got lost in the mail.
All right, I will turn it back to the Inspector General for a report out.
So first of all, I just want to thank the board and everything that has occurred. Thank Chair Burns for just reviewing things and giving us additional information. So we're going to go forward and present this is the first joint annual report for the Civilian Review Board and the Department of Inspector General. And I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful executive assistant for the board, Stephanie, to start us off.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everybody. This is a little weird, me talking. But I'm going to ask everybody to pull out your booklets and just think, so as IG stated, I'll be doing the overview for the Civilian Police Review Board's portion of the annual report. And of course, Chair Burns will present this portion or whatever she would like to do in front of City Council. This is just to give you all a quick overview. And after seeing the report and seeing everything to come together, there have been times when you hear you guys saying that you're not doing a lot. I'm really, really hoping that this annual report shows you guys the things that you have accomplished. Everything may not come like that, but I just want you guys to know that you have been doing a lot for the City of Columbus community. So if you would please go to page 4. So this is a new portion. This is a message from Chair Burns. I will not read it in its entirety, but each month you guys are fully open with discussing these cases so that the complainants can actually hear their voice. You guys have given the voice to the community, so even by reading the cases here, it's letting them be heard, and hopefully other residents will hear and see. But I think also the transparency allows for the residents to know that you guys, for lack of a better word, are not in cahoots with the CPD or the DIG. You are an independent entity. But Chair Burns did state in her 2 huge things in her message, some of the things that you guys have accomplished, and that's the additional body-worn cameras. After several complaints lack BWC evidence, the board recommended policy changes to the division requiring special duty officers to wear the BWCs. Chief Bryant and her team secured funding for 200 additional BWCs, and which are now available and the officers are wearing. Another one was, which was very big to you guys, was the expanded training on implicit bias and cultural competency. The board recommended some modules, and those were taken into consideration. So again, I want you guys to know things you're doing are working, and they are moving. So if you would please go to page 8. And this is just a real quick glance of, I won't go over this, but this is what takes place with the case prior to you all even receiving it. So when you go through the report, this is just a quick flow chart before it ever gets to you. This is part of those 180 days. So if you could please go to page 10. I hope I'm not going too fast, but this, again, this is just a very quick overview. You guys can read it later. But just real quick, these are the events that the DIG hosted in 2024. So these are the events that if they'll be taking place in 2025 as well. And I'll make sure you guys get invites to them. These are a lot of the events where we are able to meet one-on-one with the community and answer any questions that they may have, and you guys can answer them. Just short sentences, long conversations at any of these events. Okay, if you can go to page 11. Trying to move swiftly. So this is the brand new part. Page 11 starts the new addition to the annual report that is all about CPRB. We would like to thank Ms. Mary for your contribution to this report as well. Mary has assisted with the introduction piece, portion A, and it actually gives the history and the creation of the CPRB and where it started with the Columbus Community Safety Advisory Commission. So she gives a great background on that, as where the commission included a diverse cross-section of the community, such as faith leaders, police officers, academics, and social workers. So this is where the task was reviewed it was the primary task of this commission to review the various aspects of the Columbus Division of Police, including recruitment training policies and procedures. Among these recommendations were the creation of this board, an independent Department of the Inspector General. So this, what you will see throughout the report, this annual report is going to highlight your commitment to the oversight responsibilities in the city of Columbus. So when this board came to be, it took the residents to vote on this board. So in November, even though there was the commission, the Safety Commission, in November 2020, the city of Columbus overwhelmingly voted for this board. There was a 76% vote for the creation of this board. And if you, okay, and so section B, you'll see the powers and duties. Those are things that have been in past annual reports. So if you could go to page 12, this is where we have you all listed. So page 12 to page 13 contains short bios of all of you who were on the board in 2024. I apologize, Mr. Anderson, you took your oath in 2025. So I'm certain you are, sir. So, but it will just be you all, and the people that have left are not in here, but they are the short bios that you and Nate worked on. If you can go to page 14. This is a quick flow chart of what takes place with an allegation after this Civilian Police Review Board receives it. This is one of the reasons why we encourage that first flow chart and this flow chart. These are all things that need to take place within that 180 days that we are always referencing. Okay, if you can go to page 15. Okay, and so as Chair Burns mentioned in her message that I didn't read, but you'll read independently, the changes have been made. Each quarter, you all receive responses now from the chief on the quarterly recommendations that you all make. They actually respond to you now for each of those recommendations. Some of those, or most of the big, on this page are the recommendations listed that you all have made. And again, changes have been made. And some of the changes, and I was trying to look for the email and I can't find it, but I sent it to Dr. Jones, Chair Burns, and I believe Pastor Nathan. When you guys talk about verbal changes in the directives, there's a difference between the CBA and the directives for the police department. The CBA takes years. They do that every so many years. But the directives, when you guys ask about language being changed, I still can't remember that directive, and I will look it up, but you guys were concerned about the language in the directive. It was updated. It was actually updated. That doesn't take the time and voting power that the CBA does. So you guys may not see it, but it's a link, so we can constantly check it if you have questions. And that will actually probably, in my portion, because this is the verbiage that was done, the recommendations that you all had, but when it comes to stats and some of the things that you all recommended, Nate has taken care of that part statistically, and he will be reviewing that portion. And I think I'm pretty much done.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good afternoon, Chair, members of the board. I have the opportunity to present some of the statistics for the CPRB and the DIG. I'm going to start at the beginning of the process, which is receiving the citizen complaints. In 2024, we received 1,741, and this was a slight decrease from the year prior. I'll get into that a little more, why I don't really think that's a huge impact. But the majority of the complaints were received through the hotline, and that has been the case since we opened, although we did see a little more diversity in the other categories, such as the website, mainline, and the agency referrals, which is typically IAB at CPD. So I'm going to move on to page 17. So 1,469 of those complaints were closed at intake for various reasons, which we'll get into. 269 of those were opened into investigation, of which 12 were placed on administrative hold. And at the time, there were 3 pending. So we had a total of 1,741. Looking at Chart C, for the breakdown of complaints closed without investigation, the top category was referral to another agency, and this can be a lot of things, whether it be just compliment for officers or an issue that doesn't necessarily pertain to the DIG. The second is insufficient information to proceed, and the third is preliminary investigation found no police misconduct. And I'd like to highlight here, oftentimes we'll get contacts from citizens alleging misconduct where there is no policy violation. So there is no complaint to look into if it's not a possible violation of policy. And I'm going to move on to the Chart E. So again, we received 1,741 complaints. We opened 269 into investigation, and we completed 246 investigations. The top breakdown for the allegations per complaint received is actions taken, not taken, which is the same as the year prior, rude, discourteous, and/or profanity, followed by force. Moving to the, actually, the average of 2.6 allegations per case in 2024 and 3 in 2023. So the majority of the allegations were found to be unfounded, with 402. Saw a significant drop in exonerated from the year prior, and we did see an increase in sustained, for a total of 637 allegations investigated. The next page kind of shows just that how certain categories have changed, such as exonerated, unfounded, sustained. So I'll let you look at that. The next portion is investigation allegations and disposition of findings for you, the CPRB, and the chain of command at CPD. So the CPRB reviewed 426 allegations, disagreed with 2, and that makes a total of 428 allegations reviewed. You agreed with the DIG's findings 99.5% of the time. And on the other hand, CPD reviewed and returned 333 allegations that were investigated by the DIG. They disagreed with 26 of them, and that made a total of 359 allegations reviewed. They agreed with the DIG 92.7% of the time. Below that is a breakdown of the disagreement with CPD. I'll let you explore that. And then for Chart I just want to point out that there are more cases for the CPRB than the chain of command because they are later in that process, and it does take time to review it, issue discipline if necessary, and return them to the DIG for recording of the outcomes. I'm going to move to Chart J. The vast majority of outcomes resulted in no further action, which is not surprising given that the majority of dispositions were unfounded. We did have 19 positive corrective actions, 14 documented constructive counselings, 2 written reprimands, and 1 dismissal. And then finally, this was a request of the board for some location data. So we're happy to finally present that to you today. And this is for allegations investigated. So the top precinct was precinct number 2, which is the North Linden area. We received 71 allegations that were investigated from that area, followed by precinct 11, which is the south side, and then precinct 16, which is downtown. That ends my portion, but I'm welcome to answer any questions you may have.
I just had a few questions.
Of course.
I'm just trying to, just help with the numbers. And so the initial question is on page 18, we have 99 of the cases withdrawn this past year. Would you, or maybe the Inspector General could explain, we had a question that arose a few months ago with a withdrawn complaint that was then investigated. Of those 99 that were withdrawn, how many of those are investigated? All of them?
So in reference to page 18, these are complaints closed at intake reason. So the reason for the majority of those closed at intake being 99 is during the intake process, we reach out to the complainant to get additional information. And there are many times when we're reaching out, they don't give us additional information to proceed. So if we don't have enough information to look at it and they request to withdraw the complaint, then we will close it because we can't investigate a complaint that we don't have
Completely
information.
understand. Would it be helpful to reclassify the withdrawn as not enough information? That is, since it's classified as withdrawn, it appears that the reason that it was closed was it was withdrawn, but that's not your process, right? Your process is that you will investigate if there's sufficient information,
So I do understand.
even if they withdraw.
So understanding your question, so the reason we still keep the classification for withdrawn is because the complainant requested that it's withdrawn. So it's not just one that we did not necessarily follow
It doesn't
up on.
matter, though, if they request for it to be withdrawn, according to our dialogue back and forth. I mean, you were, I think, maybe I misunderstood, but I thought you were really plain. Their withdrawal does not affect your process.
Okay, so this process, so if we look at, there's two different processes. There's the process of the initial intake. So when we have the initial intake for the complaint, we take as much information as we can. So to your point, yes, if someone requests that it be withdrawn, but we have enough information to still look into it, we do. Now, if we look into it and the person has requested to withdraw the complaint and us looking into it, we have found that there was no police misconduct,
Entirely.
then we will close it as withdrawn. We still will do that. And there are cases that are closed because no further investigation is being done. So it can be confusing, but if you want, I can look into it and maybe we can give you notes as to why the complaints.
Yeah, it is confusing only because it appears the reason that you're closing it is because there's insufficient information to move forward. In of itself, that would be sufficient to close the case, right?
Well,
The withdrawing doesn't add an additional factor for you, does it?
It does add an additional factor because I think it's important to understand the difference. If you look at the top where it says insufficient information to proceed, what happens is the reason that a case can be withdrawn is if the person requested also, but they have not given us any information. So it's not to say that we didn't do follow-up. So I think it's important to point both aspects of the complaint out. I think it's important that when a citizen that we get initial complaint from does not give us enough information, that we're able to show that we followed up to get that information in order to proceed, but that complainant stated they didn't wish to proceed, so they requested to withdraw, and that was the reason why it was withdrawn, based on the fact that we do get complaints from complainants, and when we proceed to get additional information, they either don't return our calls, there's no additional information that is given, and so therefore, again, we don't have any way to proceed, but it can be a little bit different because they didn't request to withdraw.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just not understanding. The thought process. I'm sorry.
Is it a timing issue? So complaint comes in, there's nothing you all can do, nobody responds, but you don't get any answer back. It's just insufficient information. So that's the top line.
Correct.
Versus complaint comes in, you do hear back from the person, but they're like, never mind. Like, I'm not giving you more information, and therefore that's it. And so that's the withdrawn.
That's the withdrawal.
Okay.
To me, it has less to do with the information and just about the fact that the complainant decided they were going to withdraw. I mean, you could have had a lot of information up front. Complainant says, actually, I withdraw my complaint, and that's going to be, closed at intake because of potentially.
no.
But hold
That
on,
one's still
hold on,
going.
hold on. As I'm talking through, this is listed potentially closed at intake, right? Potentially. But there is enough for them to proceed with an investigation. They're going to look into it, and if there's a finding of police misconduct, then they will open, that is going to be an open investigation. Otherwise, it's the category of it being withdrawn is if there's no finding of misconduct and that person has withdrawn that particular case. To me, I'm less concerned on that categorization, but I'm open to.
Hold on, I don't. Okay, now this made me confused. So let me make sure I have this correct, because I thought the withdrawn was if an individual, there's an initial complaint, and then there's not sufficient information, and you have difficulty contacting that person for information, then that is withdrawn. Am I mistaken here?
Oh, go right ahead.
So with the withdrawn, usually what that is, they'll file their complaint, and our intake person or investigator will review the body cam if it's available, and we didn't see what they saw or what they said that they saw or did what they said happened. And so we'll contact the complainant and we'll say, hey, just that. Sir, ma'am, I'm sorry. We reviewed your complaint, we reviewed the body cam. We did not see what you said occurred. We didn't see occurred. And so at that point is when they'll say, okay, well, it did happen, but never mind, or, whatever. Okay, thank you for looking into it, or whatever the case may be. So that is a true withdrawal.
Okay.
The insufficient information to proceed is its own line for that reason. If it does fall in that category, then that was counted for that.
So you're actually doing some level of investigation on the withdrawal.
On every single one.
Yes, initially, yeah, we're going to look and see, because we have to see if we have jurisdiction
Yeah.
over that.
But you're actually looking at the body cam info or whatever.
If it's available, yeah, because we have
Oh,
to see, was it a Columbus police officer, so yes, we do some level of initial investigation, again, to determine jurisdiction. As far as, investigating, even if they said they want to withdraw, again, we look at that, right? And we can't unsee and won't unsee what we saw.
Sure.
And so we have a responsibility to still continue and conduct that investigation.
Great. And then I had one other question, and that is, the number of complaints that were sustained totally by the DIG was where is that number?
It's on page 20, and it was 98 sustained allegations.
Okay, so we have 98 sustained allegations, and then could you help me to understand the chain of command corrective actions? Because we have 98 sustained allegations, and then how does that correlate with the 33, 35, 36 corrective actions? So it's 1/3 of the recommendations approximately of sustained actually resulted in anything. Am I understanding that right, or is that?
You are, yes.
So then two-thirds, so we go through this process, just trying to understand. The board agrees with the DIG 99.5% of the time. So we've got a lot of energy going into the process. You're investigating, we're basically agreeing 99.5% of the time. Then of that really small number of cases where we do sustain, it's 99 out of 1,700, so that's 1/17th, it's, what is that, like 6%? So of the 6% that we've got sustained, they're cutting it down to 2%. Is that right?
I think so.
Yep.
I was looking at the other page as well.
Yeah.
So it looks like there are 14 where CPD changed our disposition of sustained. So that does contribute substantially to why the disciplines are off, like you pointed out, which you are correct. I also think that
Is there a number here of them not agreeing with DIG? Would that be a helpful line?
Yeah, so if you look at chart H, there's actually the breakdown of where there was disagreement with CPD and the DIG.
Okay, so that's only 26, though, total.
Is there, I'm assuming that they're also not done. Is that correct? Would that be right to say that not every case that we sent to them has come back?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay,
Yes.
because that's what
Thank you. Yes, that's a very good.
that's what I thought when I first saw it.
But you can see that in 2023, we had 80 sustained, and then we only have 20, so that's 1/4. I would assume they were done with 2023, no?
Actually,
I would not.
There is a small portion that is still outstanding because of the nature of the allegations and process that's required to investigate it or review our investigation, issue discipline if necessary. Yeah.
And does that also include arbitration, like the arbitration rights that officers have for sustained discipline or any discipline that's given to them? Like, we wouldn't get that back until that
Whole process is
completed.
Yes, I think like last year, we received, one of the cases was grieved, and the outcome was actually changed in favor of the officer. So that was actually one outcome that was changed through the grievance process. That did take a decent amount of time. And also, just to point out, sustained findings, they do take a lot more time just because of the nature of the case, because there's a lot that IEB needs to do in order to discipline officers if it is necessary. So that does take a little longer to get back to us.
So one, thank you all for this report. It's super helpful, especially to get the data year over year. Is tremendously helpful as terms of the comparison that we've been looking for in terms of actually being able to dive in and analyze some of this data. And I think we get board member Nathan here with some very good quick math to highlight. I do think just this very point of the amount of time that the board spends its energy on 99.5% of agreement to move things forward to CPD, and yet there's a number of sustained findings that move towards the chain of command, and there is a disagreement. And while it's listed as 92.7% agreement with the DIG findings, it's still a little less than 8% of those sustained findings that they're not agreeing with. And I think one of the concerns that I have and something that I'm interested in, it's the follow-up process we do with CPD, whether it's in these quarterly reports or whether it's opportunities for them to come present to our board, is what happens afterwards. And so I think that still remains a little bit of a black box for us to understand that follow-up portion. And so I just urge our review board, given this information, to think about creative ways for us to look into that follow-up process. I know other boards, across the country might do it differently, where they actually weigh in heavily on where there's disagreement between an inspector general and the chain of command, and actually scrutinize that process to see why that disagreement happened, less on the front end where you all have fully investigated the process. So just something for us to consider as we're thinking about not only improving efficiency, but ultimately getting at, I think, what is still an issue with the level of disagreement that we're seeing with CPD and chain of command for these cases.
Any other questions for the Inspector General or for Stephanie or Nate?
I just have a quick question, and it's about the heat map on page 23. Just curious to know, because precinct 2, which is, I believe that's the Linden area, kind of stands out like a sore thumb right there. Did you all look into what was the primary allegations that took place over in that area? And I'm just curious because I think that can inform police response in that area to certain things. So did you look into that?
Very much appreciate that question, because that has, looking at this map has inspired us to look into that more. It's something that we do need to look into a little bit more.
Okay.
Another question I had was, obviously, there's a significant number of actions taken, not taken. I know it's challenging in terms of the intake of how to categorize some of these, and some of that might have shifted over time in terms of how you all do that. But I was wondering if there is an additional level of analysis that could potentially go in there, or categorization, so that we have a little bit more insight on what actions taken, not taken actually means in a particular instance. I mean, for example, like I see here body-worn camera usage at, there are like 7 allegations there. I know that just even from reading just a set of cases that there's more than that. Typically, sometimes that might be categorized as actions taken or not taken, for example. So was just wondering, I obviously you all are navigating through a lot of different information here, but is there thought from your office in terms of actually being able to narrow that down a little bit more? I do see it's less than what we had in 2023, but wanted to follow up with a question on that.
We can look at that. Actions taken, not taken is actually taken a lot from just the policy, and it can encompass so much. It can encompass complaints, just kind of going off the top of my head, from officers responding to, one of the issues we had was citizens being involved in an auto accident, and officers responding, and the complaint will come to us that the officer did not do a crash report. Well, that's not a required action, so that would fall up under the complaint of an action that they felt should have occurred that didn't occur. Anything regarding body cam usually will fall up under body cam. Anything involving like refusal for name badge, that's very simple because those have specific things. But action is not taken. It's a huge, I want to say it's just a huge definition that we use. That could also be, trying to think of some other things. I know commonly the accident reports are something that we knew. One of the other things it could probably fall up under is we have had times where officers respond to take an informational report, and we've had complainants that will say, well, the officer did not arrest the person that I pointed out did this. Well, the officer will take the report if the incident did not occur in front of the officer. They may not have the ability to do the arrest. So again, that would fall up under actions that was that the citizen believed the officer should have took, but he didn't take. And on the other end, going back, we've had times where we've had reports where officers have responded and the citizen requested a report be taken, and the officer didn't take the report. And so he should have taken the report. So that goes back to, this is something, it was a violation of a policy. So what I can do, if you want we can kind of maybe provide some scenarios or information, but it is really broad. But
Yeah,
that's-
I think if it reaches a certain level, so like, force or that type of level, I think it makes sense to be a little bit more detailed there. I guess where I'm kind of confused by is the fact that body worn camera usage is talking about allegations breakdown of only 7 allegations. I mean, I think I can like count on one hand just like thinking about cases in 2024 that reviewed that is certainly higher than that number. So I don't know if that's just been categorized as something else, as somebody didn't turn their body worn camera on, or so that's just one thing that came out to me, because that seems like it's a much higher number than, and maybe that's violation of police rules or order. I'm not sure, but that one is something that has come up a few times.
Thank you. We will look at that.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Any other questions?
Chairperson, will we, at the end, have a conversation about the body-worn cameras?
Oh, we can.
Would you like to postpone that until review of the?
Sure, yeah,
The
because I think
cases?
it's policy recommendation, so.
Okay.
Well, I would like to thank the Inspector General's office. Thank you to Nate and to Stephanie for all your work in collating information, putting things together. We appreciate it. Definitely in anticipation of being able to go in front of City Council and give an update on the work that we've done. So thank you all very much for all your work and efforts going into it. All right, before we get into cases, just a couple of quick housekeeping things. First, thank you to Stephanie, who is working on seeing if we can get our April meeting to be held at a community center. We have talked about this. Stephanie's already been in contact with a couple of our rec centers, and so in the event that we are able to get that completed before April meeting, notice will go out in compliance with city ordinance requirements, but also board members will be notified so that if we have an alternate location, you will know where it is far in advance. So thank you for that. Also, after our break, I asked everyone to come prepared for nominations for chair and vice chair for our annual election. So after break, we will take those and have votes in April. Sound good? All right. Turning next to case report outs, I will turn it over to Board Member Nathan.
Thank you. And I just want to add my thanks as well to DIG and all of the folks who worked on the report. It's very helpful. Thank you. So appreciate that. This is 2024-1491. This incident arose as a result of an alleged poisoning of the complainant by the complainant's husband. When the CPD arrived, the complainant charged at his husband, excuse me. He was ordered to stop, but kept screaming, kicked the officer. Complainant alleged that the officer used excessive force by twisting his arms, picked him up by the legs, dropped him on his head. The DIG found no evidence of any of that on the body-worn camera. The complainant also alleged that the officer tried to hurt him after the complainant used a racial slur. Again, there was no evidence of this. Regarding both allegations, the DIG concluded the allegations were unfounded. We agreed. The DIG recommended that this case be administratively closed since the officer is no longer with CPD. So that is case number 1491. Case number 1548. This incident arose as a result of a wanted person dispatched to a home where an individual allegedly had removed his ankle monitor. 3 allegations were made by the complainant, who was in the home where the individual who allegedly removed his ankle monitor lived. One, that the officer placed one of his brothers in handcuffs. This was found to be consistent with CPD policy and procedures in this kind of situation, and so regarding allegation 1, the DIG found that the officer to be exonerated. Second, that the officers pointed their guns at the complainant This was also consistent with CPD policy, so they were exonerated. And third, that the officer told the complainant's sister to shut the F up. There was no evidence of that. It was unfounded. However, the DIG did add a charge in which one of the officers failed to turn on his body-worn camera. As Board Member Strickland just mentioned, we have several of these. So that was sustained. That's an additional charge by DIG. Okay. Case number 1555. The complainant said that the officers responded to her residence after the boyfriend was attacked by an alleged homeless person with a machete. Complainant said they traveled to Riverside Hospital for medical attention. CPD officer arrived to take a report, but the officer advised them that if the homeless men were to return, do not call CPD for assistance, but to call their landlord instead. Pertaining to allegation 1, the officer responded to Riverside Hospital and advised both complainants of the need for a trespass order by the apartment manager to prohibit individuals from returning. The investigation found no evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation that the officer advised them that if the homeless men were to return, do not call CPD. So that allegation was closed with a finding of unfounded. But again, here, the DIG added an additional charge in which they found no body-worn camera evidence for the officer during his interaction with the complainants, which violated CPD policy. So another instance in which the body-worn camera was not turned on. So it was with respect to this additional allegation that the recommendation was that would be closed with a finding of sustained. And that's case number 2024-1555. 2024-1573, this incident arose as a result of the arrest of the complainant for operating a vehicle while intoxicated. The complainant repeatedly said she had a knife inside her bra while she was in the back of the police vehicle. The officer conducted a brief pat-down of the complainant with the top of his hand. The complainant alleged that the officer inappropriately made contact with her breast. The DIG found that the officer's actions were within CPD policy. Oh, in addition, the complainant also repeatedly claimed to have a gun. This case was closed with a finding of unfounded. 1573, we agreed with the DIG's finding. Case 1594. This incident arose as a result of CPD officers' attempt to arrest the complainant's son due to 16 outstanding felony drug-related warrants. Complainant's son led CPD on a high-speed chase. With aerial support, the complainant's son was apprehended. Complainant alleged that the officers used excessive force in arresting her son, including pulling out chunks of his hair. Body-worn camera, cruiser video evidence, and testimony from the officers did not contain any evidence of hair pulling or excessive use of force by the officers. Rather, DIG concluded that the officers' use of force was consistent with CPD policy. DIG therefore found the allegation to be unfounded. We agreed. That's case number 1594. Case number 1601. This incident arose as a result of a vehicle owned by the complainant being stolen. A report of the car being stolen was filed that day, and then the vehicle was recovered that day. On 2 occasions, 2 different CPD officers told the complainant that the vehicle recovery would be recorded in the lead system. I guess that's a reporting system by the police. But following these 2 promises, the complainant and her son were stopped by CPD with guns drawn because the report of the stolen vehicle being recovered was never in fact recorded. The officer who took the report of the car's recovery never filed the report properly, and that was in violation of CPD policy, so DIG sustained the allegation of, how was it, well, that the complainant's car was stolen. I don't know what,
Is it actions taken, not taken? Is that?
I'm not sure how it was categorized, let's see.
Yeah.
Actions taken,
Actions
not
taken,
taken.
not taken.
Okay, so that's what it's called. Oh, it's police misconduct. That's what I was looking for, just misconduct. General misconduct, and we sustained that. And so that was case DIG sustained it, and we agreed. That's case 1601.
And real quick,
Yes,
just
please.
interrupt you there. That one in particular, interested in kind of follow-up process in terms of the chain of command of how they respond to that particular situation. Just in case that's a policy issue or practice, I want to make sure that's addressed. Thanks.
Great. And then we did have one that we had a bit of a disagreement between the subcommittee and DIG. That's case 1662. This incident arose as a result of the complainant's juvenile son, who is on the autism spectrum, having a mental health crisis. An ambulance was dispatched with CPD being called because the son was alleged to be out of control. When the CPD officer tried to gain control of the son attempted to bite the officer on several occasions. The officer told the boy twice that if he kept doing that, he would be punched. This threat was confirmed on body-worn camera and by the officer's own testimony, as well as the complainant's testimony. But biting an officer or attempting to bite an officer is considered to be a fourth-degree felony, and as a result, the officer was within CPD's policies to use level 4 force, which includes a punch. And so DIG recommended closing this case with a finding of unfounded. And I guess our subcommittee was really concerned about the officer's actions in this case. The officer was really familiar with this family and with this boy, and had previously been engaged with the family and understood the child's mental health issues. And it seemed, in reading the case, that rather than attempt to gain physical control of the boy by just overpowering him, instead, that's what the officer attempted to do, and we wondered about the lack of other alternative approaches, de-escalation or inviting in a mental health counselor, but this just appeared to be, we're just going to shut this down. There's no allegation in this of the boy being a threat to, that is a threat of, physically harming another person. And so we just wondered how you were reading this and why there wasn't a suggestion of an alternative course or additional training for this officer in dealing with a mental health crisis like this when you have a boy who he was familiar with. It felt like we're just going to use brute force, and to a certain extent, we have one tool in our toolbox, and that's a hammer. Yeah, we're concerned about that.
Okay, so responding, what I'll say is, when we're looking at cases, we look at whether the officer's actions violated a policy or procedure. We don't comment on whether or not there additional training that could have been done. We can provide a memo, and I think in the future we will provide memos to the board separate of a case stating that there's some things that we see that we feel addressing a policy that where the officers actually may not have violated a policy and procedure, but additional training tools would be great for that officer. And I think we see that in the annual report of some things that the board has made recommendations. So when we do the report, we just don't provide additional recommendations in there unless we have found that the officer's actions violated a policy and
So
procedure.
perhaps what we could then do is make a recommendation that this memo, that on our behalf, if DIG
Right.
agrees,
Yeah.
we would like a memo attached to this case, making a recommendation whether or not policy was violated. That would be step one, that we could talk about why we might disagree about whether policy was violated, but whether or not policy was violated, it felt to us to be a fairly brutal and extreme action with a boy that was known to be on the autism spectrum and was not presenting an immediate threat to others there. That, yeah, the attempt to just, I'm gonna punch you out. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think in terms of memo and those pieces, I mean, I think my argument here would be that it actually does rise to a policy violation, and that's kind of where open for board discussion because of both that terminology that was used in that particular situation, as well as the one separate thing I did have is that you listed that as unfounded. It seems like that would be exonerated. That would be categorized as exonerated. Am I right in this situation? Because the officer did in fact use that commentary, but it was not determined to be a policy violation. But and that's maybe a separate matter. But with that said, as the board or as a member reading this particular case, that to me seemed to rise to the level of a policy violation. But I don't know if there's further comments or conversations here. I think the notion that somebody who's on spectrum dealing with navigating mental health challenges in this particular situation, I think the context is important, and that the response from the officer during the interview was saying, well, he was trying to bite me, and that's a level 4, or that's a felony, and as a result, my use of force was justified in that particular case. Even use of force would be justified in that case, even if that's the case, which I think could be up for debate in that particular situation. Is it within policy or practice as a de-escalation matter for CPD officers to say, if you do that, I'm going to punch you, or you're going to get punched?
So I want to follow up to say, we received a question from the committee, and we did ask for additional information. And so we really appreciate it if we get the additional information so we're able to address this, so we can look at it. I'm just kind of going by what I'm reading and going by memory. And a lot of times I don't like to provide feedback if I haven't had a chance to review this thoroughly. But just based on the review of everything, and I'm sure my team is probably texting me, it was yeah, we did.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we did ask for additional information.
And
Nobody provided it.
Nobody provided it. So
from our committee or from who?
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, I didn't.
This is a response to the email. I basically asked that we'll be prepared. Wanted to send along a brief note that our subcommittee reviewed the case for the March meeting and had some concerns regarding the findings. We'll be prepared to discuss this further during the full board meeting, but I wanted to flag that there were questions about whether de-escalation measures were appropriately considered and whether the use of force was reasonable in this instance. Sharing this evidence in case there's additional context the Department of Inspector General would like to provide ahead of the meeting. That was on February 20th, 2025. I understand there was also some the response on February 24th from you, Stephanie, thank you, was please send the questions that you have so there's not any delays caused for the case. So we didn't follow up with additional questions there. Certainly admit that the questions, at least to my understanding, were included in that initial email of saying there were questions about whether de-escalation measures were appropriately considered and whether the use of force was reasonable in this instance, sharing this in advance in case there's additional context for the Department Inspector General. So I don't know, maybe I could have gotten more specific than those questions, certainly, but I think the goal was to bring this up at this meeting, just to kind of give a heads up that this is going to be a case in which we have further questions about. Not to mention, there might be other board members that are not on the review committee that might have questions about this particular case in terms of 1662. So both, not just in terms of the heads up piece, which I completely understand and wanted to get all those details, but even thinking about how we operate as a board, thinking about the best way to make sure everybody's ready for this case.
So
Yeah.
I just wanted to just clarify. So the fact that the officer, and I want to check on the case because I don't believe the officer punched the person. I think it was a threat.
But-
because the person had on at least one or two occasions was threatening to bite the officer. And the officer was responding by telling the person, because they attempted to bite them, letting them know, if you bite me, this is what's going to occur. Right, so,
But I think
so what we're saying is, and again, the board has the ability that if there's something that we wrote and you feel you disagree or you feel like some additional training should be done, definitely, the board has the ability to do that, yes. And we always say
That's what we're saying, well, we're just trying to,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I think,
I've got a question. So, at any point during the case, was a crisis intervention team called to go out with,
No.
on the call to
Not-
respond?
not-
Okay,
not-
so
not-
it wasn't called, okay. So, I don't know that it's recommendations around, like, prior relationship is the way to go. I feel like this is one of those things where if it is known that someone's having a mental health crisis, and we know that efforts generally are made, I'm guessing that there is no integration, just similar as we've talked about, there's no integration with use of force and cultural competence, use of force and implicit bias. There's probably also no integration with use of force and the scenario where someone has behaviors that are a direct result of a mental health or behavioral diagnosis, which is why there's no policy violation. Right, like that's just not how use of force is executed, and so I'm wondering whether that is where we want to focus recommendation efforts.
I mean, it's a big question. I mean, is there no I mean, what
I
is
don't
the
believe there
current?
is. Like that, that's part of why we made it for some of the other issues we've run into with use of force issues. I mean, I know from working with young children who are on the autism spectrum that many of those kids do not like being touched. And so if the officer was trying to touch a child who's on the autism spectrum, it does not surprise me that the child would respond by trying to bite them, because that is not, that's not the level of their comfort. And so I think that it's been a while since I've looked at the use of force policy, but the last time I looked, there was not a taking into consideration of use of force in response to a child who.
Exactly.
So I'm thinking about, in terms of our wording for our recommendation, that part of what we have to take into consideration is this interplay
Yeah,
between
no, that'd be
mental
about.
health intervention,
The
crisis
reason that I
intervention.
mentioned the officer's prior engagement was that this wasn't a surprising situation. He wasn't caught off guard, or he was in a situation that he had been in, a number of times before, and it would just seem reasonable that he would have thought about some kind of crisis intervention or some sort of de-escalation, and in that case, he just chose not to do that. So, but I agree with the general policy change that you're recommending, Chairperson.
To me, it's not even a conversation specifically about the use of force policy because of the actions taken or not taken in this instance, whether it's the conduct in this, whether it's inappropriate or appropriate conduct, because of he did not punch the child. He said he would punch the child. And to me, I think that's a problematic statement, but I think the concern I have is that to your point, Inspector General, you said that, he didn't punch the child, but based on this logic, moving it forward, it seems that per policy, it would have been maybe the finding of your Department Inspector General of that would not be a policy violation if he had used that level of force because the child attempted to bite him, the officer. That, to me, seems like a major problem with both the practice and or lack of policy here. And so, but I don't know what others think, if that's just, there's just no policy and maybe we write a memo that comes along with it, or are there other potential violations in this particular instance from the officer's actions? And so that's where I'm at. That's my concern. He didn't just say it once, he said it multiple times. There were other factors and circumstances at play that he was well aware of. And the notion that, it's a level, basically say it's a 4th degree felony assault, considering a bite, I think even that in of itself is I think there's knowingly involved in there. I mean, there's some other actions in terms of whether or not that actually rises to that level in this instance. And so whether or not a punch would have actually indeed been justified. So that, to me, I think warrants further review. But I'm open to obviously hearing what other board members who maybe weren't on the subcommittee think about officers' actions in this case, or subcommittee members.
I don't know, I'm just going to give a little slightly different perspective that we should probably take into consideration in this conversation. And so when we think about crisis intervention training, officers have it as a part of their academy training. However, not all officers get advanced crisis intervention training, which is, so like this is an 18-year officer or something, so he may have had it years ago, but may not have had any type of updated training. And so I think maybe that should be taken into consideration. I'm a little hesitant with, and this is why we're not policymakers here, but creating a policy because we also have, in the interest of everything, and I don't want to discredit the entire situation, but in the interest of things, we also have to be mindful of officer safety as well. And so that is important, just as the safety of the citizen in these situations. And so when we think about their use of force policy, that is a concern, right? We got the use of force policy because oftentimes they learn that in isolation of a situation involving somebody in a mental health crisis or whatnot. And so, thinking about the best way to handle that should have been to probably call in a crisis intervention trainer or somebody who's, experienced in mental health to handle that situation. That may have been the best. But if the youth or whomever the individual is actively posing a threat, saying that they're going to bite, then if we do bring in a mental health person, we're compromising their safety at the same time too. And so it's one of those things where we have to figure out, how do you strike a balance with getting this individual the help that they need, but also ensuring that they don't harm anybody in the process of doing that. And I don't know about you all, but if somebody is threatening to bite me, I'm no sworn police officer, but we're about to fight. So I think, it's taken that, and again, officers are trained to handle they're trained to handle certain situations. But a person in a mental health crisis, I don't know if they're that trained, given they have to follow like the use of force policy and all of that. And so I think if, we give some recommendations, I would say, recommendations centered on training, right, around crisis intervention and having officers perhaps take that advanced crisis intervention training, so not just some, but all of them have it. Evaluating the policy is another thing that can also be done too. But whatever we do, we have to keep in mind the safety of the citizen, protecting them, especially a child, right, who has autism, taking all of that into consideration, but then also ensuring the safety of the officers while we're doing all of this. So it's a lofty, thing that we're taking on, but I just want to keep all of that in perspective as we're thinking about this.
I think, too, just briefly to add, the reason why I think it's the offense level that the officer said to the child is because it's an officer. Like, that is one of the things that raises that makes that an offense of that level is who's being bitten.
Right.
So it wouldn't have been, kid bites me,
It's not a fourth degree
it's not a
felony.
it's not a fourth degree felony. So
We don't know. I mean, I'm just saying, we don't know that.
no, I know that
In terms of in this particular situation.
No, but I'm saying as a criminal defense attorney, I know that. Like, I'm just sharing, that's why there's a felony level.
Because it's an officer.
Because.
Okay, you might be.
Which brings me back to, we had a similar scenario before, if everyone remembers. There was a case in which a father called an officer to their home because he found out that an adult had been soliciting his child for naked photos, and the officer said, and we all were like, wait a second,
Why
like
the
that,
officer
why
say that?
why the officer say
Yes.
that? And we had this discussion before about, we can absolutely disagree about whether a thing should have been said, but if what the officer is saying is accurate, that, like, punishing them for making an accurate statement is not, I don't know that gets us anywhere, or then puts officers in the position where, well, I can't tell the truth. And the reality is biting a police officer is an F4 because there is a provision in the code that makes who the victim is in that scenario the officer and raises that offense level. So my point being is that when we think about recommendations, thinking in terms of, I do not believe we are going to be able to policy recommend away officers being able to say things that are accurate in the midst of those scenarios.
So I'm not
No, but that is what Mr. Strickland said about the statement. Like, you have a problem with the statement that he said to the child, right?
No, I have a problem with the context of the entire situation, which I'll go into. But specifically, though, that would be a charge or an allegation that's made. But are you saying as a public defender, like, you still have the opportunity to say, actually, it doesn't rise to that particular level? Like, in this scenario, it doesn't rise to the level because there's the knowingly stuff. I understand the fact that you have a police officer and why that threshold is different. But the statement made here is concerning. I mean, it basically says, well, if he tries to bite me, he could get punched. When asked why by the Department of Inspector General office, he'd make a comment like this. The officer explained that if he was bitten, that is a felony assault on a police officer, and that per policy, the officer can use whatever force is necessary to stop that from occurring. First of all, I would say, no, he cannot use whatever force is necessary to stop that from occurring. He might be able to use the statement, but the notion here that he can use whatever force is necessary to stop that from occurring, he cannot do that. And so, like, the concern is both the statement made and the fact that he believed, well, he was going to bite me, that's a felony, and so I can use whatever force to stop that.
So if I remember correctly, and this is just technicality, understanding the use of force, officers can go one level above the force that is being implemented on them.
Yes.
So that is correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But cannot
So,
use
but whatever force is I
cannot
mean, if we're
do
gonna wordsmith it, whatever is not accurate. It's
Yeah.
one degree above.
And so that,
Okay.
I mean, that is concerning in and of itself, and I think you had a point.
The officer was explaining to the DIG why he, I don't know if it's a he or she, behaved in the way that they did. And it's what is in their mind at the time that, in real time. And so in real time, if the officer was assessing the situation and believed that the child was going to bite him or her, that statement is factually accurate. They could use a level of force or equal to or one level above, which would include a punch, to disarm or to stop the bite.
And I guess I'm concerned that during the course of the investigation, the interview, the officer, it says the language about the officer can use whatever force is necessary to stop that from occurring. I mean, I don't know if that's needs some additional training there, or if that was not what they responded with, but that is in the language here, and that's concerning because that's not actually what he or she can do.
I'm just going to add, if I may, I think Dr. Jones did a great job at illustrating about the intervention. I'm not going to speak to that. I'm just going to, that's for the board to make those recommendations. The facts are that it was a threat, right? And so the officer is able to advise of potential consequences. That's a de-escalation technique. That can be a de-escalation technique if they advise of a potential consequence, right? And it was effective in this case because there was no punching and they were able to gain control of, the subject. So, again, I'm not, that's what we're looking at from the Inspector General's office. Again, I think you were right on point, Pastor Nathan, for the board, if you all want to make another recommendation as far as the intervention services or whatever, then I think that this is the right place to do that.
Yeah, so, yeah, we definitely would want to do that. Do we need to write something? Are you going to, how does this work?
Well, I think we'd have to do it, but
Yeah.
then, yeah, I think it would have to come from us as a board.
From the whole board or?
I think we just make it, whether it's a recommendation or.
Voted on,
Yeah,
right, just
that
like
we
you would
vote,
for any
you
other
make a
recommendation.
motion. I think the wording is important,
Yes.
I agree with
especially in
that.
context of what we've even talked about with our prior recommendations. So I think we can, two separate things. I think the subcommittee can decide what its vote will be on the individual case, and separate apart from that, what's the recommendation that's
Right.
going to be about this scenario? Yeah, like what curative or broader recommendation do we want to make?
I would just like to add, for the recommendation, I think, perhaps we can take some time to think about the actual wording of that, and then perhaps bring it back, to our next
do that
meeting
next time.
after we,
Sure.
think about it, and so that way some true thought goes into the policy recommendation.
That will work.
That makes sense.
I've had, and I'm not sure if this fits in with this, but on these mental health issues, mental health calls, I'm not sure if we can do something, but this issue has always bothered me, where a call goes out, and we had a situation last year where a call went out, and the officers went to a home that was a home for the mentally ill. And out of that incident, an individual ended up dying. And I think eventually it was addressed by the CPD, and they indicated that they didn't have a list of these homes, but they were going to eventually get a list. So that was going to happen. So in this situation here, the officer knew, I don't know at what point he knew, that this individual was autistic. So my question is, why can't a crisis intervention team, why can't that unit be sent there? Someone who didn't get training 18 years ago, and would be there so that this officer can know that you can't threaten or touch an individual who's autistic because you're going to trigger something and this is going to happen. Someone who's trained. And I know that the officers are supposed to be trained now, the younger ones, but I'm not sure how thorough that training is. And we've been told that they have a team that's supposed to go out. But then we're also told that that team just wasn't available. So can we address this? Can we, I know we've gotten, we've done something with body cams. Why, can we get more funding for these teams? Because it seems like there are so many mishaps and deaths when mental health is at issue. So I'm just throwing that out there to figure this out.
That would be a valid recommendation.
I think that would be a great recommendation. I think this goes, I know that a lot of folks are talking about right now in the city around alternate response models or dual response models, but specific alternate response models for these types of situations as well. I think we can certainly make that recommendation. I think, as we think about the policy section of this, like maybe we have a set of recommendations just like have gone into the annual report, but it is deeply concerning that we have these instances occur that did not need to end up in this situation. Thankfully, that it seems like the situation was de-escalated after time, but it could have been a much more concerning outcome here. But certainly I'd be open to that as a board.
We'll do that, so we don't take any more time. Chair Burns, we'll at our next subcommittee meeting, put a recommendation together and run it by the board, and we'll see where we go.
Okay. Sounds good. So would you like to move?
So I'd like to
your other
move
things?
to, I need to make two motions. One concerning the cases, and then the other regarding the additional charges that DIG, no,
Yeah, I'm not quite, on this particular case, are you saying you want to move to agree with the finding?
no,
Okay, we'll hold.
we're going to table it.
Okay, great.
We'll talk.
Perfect.
Come back and
Excellent. Okay.
see where we are.
Yep.
As long as we're within the time limit, are we good on that?
I'm gonna see how many days
Looks
we
like
are.
58 days was the initial, but I don't
Yeah, it
know
was
where we're
at-
at now.
It was 58 days when we closed it, and we closed it on, I'm looking at the date of the signature.
So I don't want to go
We closed
beyond
it
our,
January 29th of this year.
so then we'll be in April. So that'll work, right?
As of today?
Your days were 50-something, their days are 33 today,
Okay.
so it's.
Okay, so it's at 33 days for the board.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, we'll be within.
So we'll
yeah,
be-
We'll be within. Yeah,
We'll be good then.
yeah,
Yeah,
Okay,
it's moved in.
great.
thanks.
So then, so I'd like to make a motion to accept the DIG's findings in cases number 1491, 1548, 1555, 1573, 1594, 1601. So that's the initial motion.
Okay, may I have a second, please? Okay, thank you. Anyone have any other questions on those cases? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand if you want to accept those cases as recommended. All right, motion's carried, thank you.
Then in case number 1548 and case number
1555.
1555, is that it? Let me see. Sorry. I also want to make a motion to accept the DIG's additional charges in those two cases.
May I have a second, please?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please raise your hands. Motion's carried, thank you.
And then we're going to, do I need to move to table, or I don't
Nope.
need a motion to extend this? Okay, great.
We'll table 1662 for our April meeting. All right, next to our combined subcommittee, board members Younger and Jackson.
Okay. Case number 2024-1276, this is an allegation of misconduct. Allegation number one, the complainant alleged that an officer in CPD Cruiser 33 harassed him by following him around a McDonald's parking lot and not leaving him alone after he requested the officer leave him alone numerous times. The complainant also alleged, too, the officer attempted to get into his vehicle. The DIG's investigation consisted of an interview with the complainant, review of the body-worn camera, a visit to the McDonald's where the alleged incident took place, and a review of CPD policy and procedure. With regard to allegation one, the investigation found no evidence that the officer harassed the complainant by following him around the McDonald's parking lot and not leaving him alone after he requested that the officer leave him alone. And also, let's see here. There is a recommendation that this allegation be closed as unfounded. With regard to allegation number two, the investigation found no evidence that this officer attempted to get into his vehicle. Therefore, it is recommended that this investigation be closed as unfounded. Our review committee reviewed this, and we agree and accept the findings of the Inspector General as to this case. Case number two, this is case number 2024-1432. This was a referral from Internal Affairs. The complainant originated from an interaction between the complainant. This complaint originated from an interaction between the complainant and Columbus police officers. The complaint alleged that the officers raped her during the arrest. The Columbus DIG investigation consisted of review of CAD, review of BWC, review of Franklin County Municipal Court records for the complainant, review of Franklin County Sheriff's Office inmate search, and a review of the Internal Affairs report. The Internal Affairs conducted an investigation into the criminal allegation. They closed their findings as unfounded. The investigation their investigation found no evidence to substantiate the allegation made by the complainant. Then the Department of the Inspector General's administrative investigation yielded no evidence to substantiate the allegation made by the complainant and the officer's actions were supported by CPD policy and directives. The DIG concurs with the finding of unfounded by Internal Affairs Bureau for this complaint. Therefore, it is recommended by the Inspector General that the complaint be closed as an administrative closure. Our committee reviewed this, and we do agree with the finding of the Inspector General. The BWC, I'm just going to give a little bit more just because of the allegation. The BWC here was on the entire time. She was arrested on an active warrant. The search of the arrestee was conducted by a female officer before the arrest. She did remain aggressive throughout the booking. She slammed her own head on the glass pane on entry into the jail. The jail would not take her when she was taken there because of this rape allegation. She needed to be transported to the hospital for an evaluation. Thus, the officers did transport her to Grant for an evaluation. And the BWC camera was on and showed all of this. And no time during the encounter was the allegation that she made, did it come into fruition. So that's why we agree with the Inspector General.
Is there a little bit more detail in terms of maybe during the interview with the complainant or in this particular instance?
The DIG attempted to obtain the complainant's contact information for the interview, was not successful. A review conducted with the Franklin County Municipal Court records, available CPD documentation, and the Sheriff's Department inmate yielded no usable contact information for her. Therefore, an interview was unable to be conducted. All records indicated that the complainant is homeless and there were no phone numbers listed for her. However, the Inspector General did continue their investigation by going through everything, all the BWC footage, all the investigation that Internal Affairs did, and so they still continued the investigation.
And then, so the initial complaint, it stemmed from IAB. Was that based off of, just so you understand, was there an allegation made during kind of this interaction, and then that's where the complaint came, or was there a separate time in which this individual filed a complaint and then IAB reviewed it? I was just trying to get an understanding of how this made it to IAB.
It's not responding, so I would have to,
The complaint went to IAB.
Yeah, I was just wondering, how did that happen in the first place? Did the individual reach out to IAB, or was this something that allegedly occurred during the interaction, and then IAB looked into it?
yeah, so the complaint, so I'm looking at the allegation. We got the complaint because the complaint alleged to a jail staff person.
Okay.
That officers raped her. So we would have gotten that, we would have opened it up, we would have forwarded anything that involves criminality, we forward it to IAB for them to investigate first. And then it comes back to us once the criminal is done, and then we do our administrative investigation, and just following up administratively is to make sure that the interaction that occurred until it ended, that the officers' actions were within policy and procedure.
Okay, that's helpful. And then just one question on there, the transfer to the hospital, who did that, who made that transfer?
I would have to check, but I believe based on the
It says
report,
the-
it says.
The officers
the officers
transported
did.
her.
Yeah, well, I guess a little confused there in the sense that if there was an allegation made of assault and then those same officers did the transport to the hospital,
if I
or was
could-
it a different set of officers?
The officers requested a wagon to transport
Okay.
individual to Grant Hospital for an evaluation. The wagon arrived, the officers placed her in the police van for transport.
Got it.
The BWC remained on throughout the entirety of the encounter with her. At no time did the officers do what the complainant alleged. So so the wagon was requested, and then the wagon transported her to the hospital. Good?
Yeah,
Oh.
I'm not sure in terms of, it seems like it was a different set of officers that transported the individual.
It is.
Okay.
The wagon
Just wanted-
transported her.
Just wanted to, and then, but you were mentioning something about the body worn camera was on the whole time.
For the officers, yeah.
Oh, okay. Was that?
The body-worn camera was on the officers when they brought her to the police station. She then did hit her head up against the glass and so forth. At that time, she told a jail staffer. Then those officers gave her to whatever the wagon was that took her. The reason why we're saying the body-worn camera was on is because the incident would have occurred before they got to the wagon. So that's why the inference was the body-worn camera was on the entire time.
I see.
And at the time of transfer, the
Got it.
body-worn
Okay.
camera goes off on these officers, and it's with the,
Okay, that's
if
helpful.
that's where you.
Yeah, that was my
Yeah.
question, was, I wasn't sure if they were in this.
We discussed that when we were together, yeah.
Okay.
Case number 2024-1525. This is an allegation of misconduct. The complainant alleged, one, an officer arrived at her residence and gave a ticket to the occupant. Two, the officer tackled the occupant. Three, the officer punched and kicked the occupant, and 4, the officer charged the occupant with resisting arrest. The Columbus DIG's investigation consisted of an interview with the complainant, an interview with the officer, review of CAD data, review of BWC, attempts to obtain the use of force report, and a review of CPD policy. In regards to allegation 1, the investigation revealed an officer did arrive to the complainant's residence to give a ticket to the occupant. The officers arrived to the residence to determine who was driving the vehicle that participated in a traffic violation. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed as exonerated. With regard to allegation number 2, the investigation revealed that an officer did tackle the occupant after he attempted to run away from the police officers, which is within CPD policy. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed as exonerated. With regard to allegation number 3, the investigation revealed at no point did the officer punch or kick the occupant. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed as unfounded. With regard to allegation number 4, the investigation revealed the occupant was charged with resisting arrest. The occupant attempted to flee multiple times from the officers and failed to comply when the officers were attempting to arrest this occupant. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed as exonerated. During the course of the investigation, the DIG discovered that a level of force was used during this run that required a use of force report to be completed, and one was not completed. This is a violation of CPD policy. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed as sustained. So there is a DIG complaint where, since the use of force report was not completed, the officer was interviewed. He did admit that he failed to complete that report. As to case number 2024-1547, this is an allegation of misconduct. Officers arrived at the complainant's grandmother's residence with a search warrant. He complained that the officers injured his dog while searching the residence, number 1, and number 2, after the officers entered the residence, they destroyed various items in his grandmother's home. The investigation consisted of interviews with the complainant, the grandmother, CAD data, body-worn footage, forced entry damage to property report, a photo log from Internal Affairs, property investigation report, and CPD policy procedure review. Pertaining to allegation number 1, the complainant and his grandmother advised the DIG that they did not see officers injure the dog, but recognized that the dog was responding to commands differently after the officers left the scene. Neither party was able to provide photos or veterinary records to indicate injury. The investigation found no evidence to substantiate the complainant's allegation that the responding officers injured the complainant's dog while executing the search warrant on the premises. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed as unfounded. Pertaining to allegation number 2, the investigation found that the officers entered the grandmother's residence while executing a high-risk narcotics search warrant for the premises. The investigation found that the officers documented the Ring doorbell attached outside of the home was damaged. It was damaged, but the BWC footage for the officers did not show the officers caused damage to the inside of the residence during the search, as reported by the complainant. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed as unfounded. We did review, and our review committee does concur with the findings of the Inspector General. Case number 2024-1559. Let's see here. Okay, this was this was an allegation that the DIG received a complaint that alleged that on October 25th, 2024, CPD officers, one, attempted to break into the complainant's residence using a credit card, and two, they searched his residence when they were just supposed to be getting a jacket, and three, took his money bag and placed it into evidence. The DIG's investigation consisted of an interview with the complainant, interview with the focus officer and the witness officer, CAD review, BWC review of case report summary, and policy procedure reviews. With regards to allegation number one, the Department of the Inspector General found evidence that substantiated the complainant's allegation that the CPD officer attempted to gain entry into his residence using a credit card when the door was locked. Although CPD officer did not gain entry into the residence, the officer did attempt to get back in to the residence without consent or cause to do so. This does violate CPD policy and procedure for consent searches and rules of conduct. Therefore, allegation number one is sustained by the Department of the Inspector General. With regards to allegation number two, the IG found no evidence to substantiate this allegation that he searched, that the officer searched his residence when they were just supposed to be looking for the jacket. The complainant's girlfriend, who lived with the complainant, asked the CPD officer to go get her jacket from upstairs, which he retrieved in a matter of a minute. No search was ever conducted of the complainant's home during the retrieval of the jacket. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed as unfounded. And the third allegation, the DIG found evidence to substantiate this complainant's allegation that the CPD officer took his money bag and placed it into evidence. The residence was under a narcotics investigation, and a narcotics detective advised the CPD officer to confiscate the complainant's money bag and place it into evidence. The CPD officer followed policy and procedure while doing what he was asked to do. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation be closed with a finding of exonerated. So our review committee reviewed this, and we did accept the findings of the Inspector General as to this case. And I think, okay, the next one is 2025-1588. This was a misconduct allegation. The complainant stated that he was a victim of domestic violence by his spouse. His spouse is a CPD officer. The complainant alleged, one, that the officer physically assaulted him while in uniform. The officer provided false information. Number two, allegation two, there are a total of 4 allegations here. Actually, there are going to be a total of 9 allegations. 4 allegations by the complainant, 5 allegations by the Department of the Inspector General. All right. So allegation number 2, the officer provided false information to Springfield Police Department officers by telling them specifically she was not married to the complainant and the minor children in the residence were not her biological children. Number 3, the complainant alleged that the officer and her sergeant conducted personal business on CPD time. And number 4, the sergeant worked as a police officer outside of his jurisdiction. In addition, the complainant stated the sergeant unlawfully held his vehicle hostage at a CPD precinct. The investigation consisted of an interview with the complainant, a review of home security footage, a review of GPS information from CPD, a review of the Springfield Police Department incident report, a review of CPD intra-divisional administrative investigation report, misuse of discretion, interviews of the focus officers, and a review of applicable policy and procedure. With regard to allegation number 1, allegation number 1 that was that the officer physically assaulted him. There is insufficient evidence to determine that this allegation or this alleged incident occurred. It is recommended that this allegation against the officer be closed as not sustained or inconclusive. With regards to allegation number 2, the investigation found no evidence that the officer provided false information to the Springfield Police Department. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation against this officer be closed as unfounded. With regards to allegation number 3, the investigation found evidence that the officer and her sergeant conducted business, personal business on CPD time. Therefore, it is recommended that the allegation against the officer and her sergeant be closed as sustained. Number 4, the investigation found evidence that the sergeant worked as a police officer outside of his jurisdiction. Therefore, it is recommended that this allegation against the sergeant be closed as sustained. Now, during the course, those are the 4 allegations. During the course of the investigation, the Columbus DIG found multiple CPD policy violations. First, the officers failed to activate their BWC, both officers. An officer did not complete a letter of information to his chain of command informing them of the incident as required per CPD directives. The officer's actions violated the officer oath by acting at all times in an ethical and trustworthy manner and by making decisions based on values of the organization as required by CPD policy. An officer's actions violated CPD Division Directive 4.06, which states, quotes, "Division personnel shall not give special privilege or consideration to any active or former law enforcement employee who becomes involved in a domestic violence situation. Responding personnel shall comply with the Domestic Violence Directive and applicable sections of the law." The officer's actions violated CP Directive 7.02, which states, when practical, sworn personnel shall avoid direct enforcement action in situations in which they have a personal interest. If a sworn supervisor is not available, or if the time and circumstances require immediate action, sworn personnel shall use their own discretion based upon the mission and vision statements, official oath, and code of ethics to make a good faith effort to handle the situation properly. So, to clarify, the DIG allegations, both of them failed to turn on their body-worn camera, and they were both sustained by the Department of the Inspector General. As to the sergeant did not complete a letter of information to his chain of command informing him of the incident as required by the supervisor's manual, and that was sustained. Both officers violated their officer's oath by acting at all times in ethical and trustworthy manners as required by CPD policy and procedures. They violated CPD Division Directive 4.06 that in domestic violence situations, they shall not give, any special consideration to other officers on the force. And then DIG allegation number 5, that which provides they should at all times give their superiors their location or availability to respond to potential assigned calls for their service in the assigned jurisdiction. And none of these were done. Our review committee reviewed this thoroughly, and we found that we agreed with the Inspector General as to all 9 allegations. And the final one, 2024-17-19, questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In this particular instance, do we know whether CPD has taken action on this situation already, or if they've gone through an investigative process themselves? I wasn't sure if that's in there. I'm trying to read the actual case in a little bit more detail here, but it seems like the level of allegations and violations here rise to some needed intervention.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming that,
Yeah, this was a case where they were here and obviously drove to Springfield on Columbus City time, and all this kind of unfolded. So there were a lot of violations that you found that we agreed on because of the fact that they left, their job, they left their post, went to Springfield. All this occurred, like I said, on city time. So.
And knew what they were doing because no BWC was ever turned
Yeah.
on. And, yeah, it was pretty egregious. So,
And I think, too, they didn't even notify Springfield Police
right.
Yeah.
of the incident as well.
So
We
I
can-
don't know what's.
Yeah. We can definitely follow up to see if anything has changed when they were interviewed. Nothing was mentioned at that time. And normally officers, well, I will say usually officers that come before us during an interview, if there were some type of disciplinary actions that were taken or addressed, they will usually let us know. And we do mention that in the report so that it is considered, because we don't want to recommend disciplinary actions if there has some been taken. But we can definitely follow up, but I'm sure forwarding, the report on, there probably, if it hasn't been addressed, I'm sure it will be.
yeah, it looks like here the administrative investigation was completed on November 17, 2024. Do we have any updates on that? And I apologize if I missed that, but
So that case, I signed off on January 31st. So again, I can follow up and let you know, but.
well, I believe it says that the Department of Inspector General, you all received the CPD administrative investigation on November 17th, 2024.
Okay, hold on, let me pull the file.
So,
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
Or I guess maybe you received it on January 1st. There was an interview on November 17th.
Let me look at the information, because I'm looking at information and the notes, so I'll have to get back with you, and I'll try to get back with you before the board ends to see if I can provide that information.
Okay. And I bring that up because I think it would be helpful to just get some insights in terms of even how CPD does their initial administrative investigation in this particular instance. So they did an administrative investigation a few weeks after this incident occurred. It's not clear to me yet what came from that administrative investigation.
there was no finding on that because we asked for it, and they gave it to us with no finding.
Just no finding was there. Okay. So question here. So they did their administrative investigation. There was no finding. You all did a thorough investigation through this process, found there was quite a bit of violation. This is the findings that were found here. And then now we are receiving that. We are then about to make a recommendation whether we agree, accept those findings, and then send that to CPD in the chain of command. I guess what are they going to say? Well, we did an administrative investigation. There was no finding. Or are they going to say, okay, we'll look in this a little further, I guess, now that you've done this full investigation?
Correct me if I'm wrong, it's not the same. So that administrative review, that could have been done by someone right above the sergeant, is that correct? But that's not the same group who gets chain of command recommendations when the board sends over.
Correct, ma'am.
Okay.
I guess it's still somewhat concerning that at that level, there was an administrative investigation and there was a determination to be no finding, and then it's not only until now in March of 2025. Obviously, there's a whole process we have to go through the Department Inspector General, but it does seem that there was an awareness of this incident earlier. And so I'm confused what's going to change now that we've gone through a full investigation and our board reviews it, and when we move this forward one way or the other, what's going to happen differently?
Clarify, the no findings just meant they stopped because we had jurisdiction to do the investigation. So it wasn't that they they concluded with no findings. They stopped, and it was turned over to us.
Okay, and then so the next step will be that they will take this and go through. Are they going to go back through their process, or
They're waiting for our
Waiting for
fine.
you all for us to give it to you to make a finding.
Well, so and that makes sense, but here's where I'm also confused, though. So they are waiting for us to then get this, but it's not like they just review what you all did. They then do their own investigation. Sometimes it's inclusive of your findings, but they go through their process. So I guess I understand the jurisdiction piece, but I don't understand that what's keeping them from just accepting your review, or they're just now starting over even after they get.
Yeah, they don't do an investigate. They don't reinvestigate
Okay.
our cases.
What do they do?
Because that's against the CBA.
Yeah, so what do they do exactly?
They just review our investigation and see if it was in with
To the CBA.
yeah, if it was in accordance to the CBA, and if what we're saying, that if we said it was sustained, if in fact they agree that it was in violation.
So if they don't,
Division directives.
So if they don't investigate, do they look into it further without investigating? I guess where I'm at is, it seems like at other times they've done their own. Maybe they don't call it an investigation, but they've done their own research or something that.
Like after this process,
Yes.
you're saying?
Yes. So what do they consider that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of I can't think of a situation where they did that.
Yeah.
Team before,
Mm-hmm.
and so they
Right.
have like a review process, and they'll ask questions, but they don't go to the full extent of like sending investigators out to the field. They're more so, we actually talked last meeting very briefly about having them come in and talk about their process. And so I think that's something we can have them do in very similar fashion to how we've had the chief come in and whomever we prep with questions. But and the way that it was explained to me was prioritizing as well is a thing that they do. So for instance, if recommendations come in and you have something this egregious versus profanity being said, they are going to move a case like this up to the front of their queue for
Well, maybe.
looking at and reviewing. No, they do. Like
Okay.
that's
Is that
part of why we don't get back. I've never seen a policy, but I've had a conversation with the officers who get the information. That's part of why we don't get back reports as quickly as we might think we would like to, because as it comes in, they will weight it. If it's a more serious allegation that could result in termination of an officer, that one's going to go to the front of their review and leapfrog ones that would potentially result in written reprimands. So I think we can ask them to come and talk about, Commander Lip, to come and talk about their process, kind of what they do. But I just did want to highlight, it's not the same, like someone who is the supervisor of the sergeant, the lieutenant, whomever, doing an administrative review or starting it is not the same as the group that does the process that we recommend. So I understand where you're coming from, but I don't want to say it's the same result's going to happen, because it's a different avenue once we send something saying that we've sustained findings of misconduct.
I guess to me, so this is helpful clarity. So you all go through a full investigation, interviewers, interview officers, interview complainants, review all the footage, all the documentation, then bring this to us. You have the full reports filled out, the very careful, meticulous analysis. And then that is then, we debate, have conversations about that, submitted to chain of command. And from there, they don't start their own investigation of this particular situation, because that would be, outside of their jurisdiction in this particular instance. But they do what is called a review process, which is there like a certain level of like review that it has to meet before it hits an investigation level that they are not able to do? Because that's where I'm not sure, because it seems like there's a number of cases that we just went through the annual report where they actually disagree with the findings.
Well, in 3/4 of the cases.
Yeah, so you all had a full investigation, had your findings, and then they do a review, which I don't know what that entails. I'm assuming in their review, are they allowed to re-interview officers, or like what, when does that happen, or does that happen? Because that seems to be a little bit of a black box for me to get an understanding of what happens after it goes from us to CPD.
I think that's why we gotta get that chair. And to your point, exactly, we need to get whoever that is in here. I think the Inspector General trying to answer that question is futile, but having them come and us asking them those direct questions, I think is where we really want to be. We want to know, to your point, to both accentuate what we see in the annual report and what we have going forward. We want to ask the people who are on the next step, what do you do at the next step? Not so much, I mean, they brought us to here.
Certainly.
Now tell us where we go and what follows up on those decisions that we've made, because perhaps if we get an even clearer understanding on that side, maybe some of the decisions we make, we'll know how to say them in the right way to escalate them to the front of the line to get perhaps a different result.
Well, certainly, but I agree. I think having them maybe consistently, maybe even having representatives here during every meeting, right? I mean, there's options, like if that's something that certainly they're available to do. I guess where I'm at is kind of like, what are folks' understanding of what happens when it gets to that process? Because I think that we may have different understandings of what actually happens during once CPD gets it. And I guess the reason that I certainly want them to explain, but the answers that we've gotten in the past have varied, and so I actually would like some clarity on what hits a review process, what is considered a review process, and what is considered an investigation that is actually not something that they would do at this stage. So I don't know if others have ideas, but it seems like Chair Burns, there's something about a priority system that they have. Because to me, then I'm really kind of confused as to why then we have the lull period that we do. I understand that there's a backlog, but the full investigation, I think, takes longer than, in theory, the review process would take, but maybe it doesn't. So these are all questions that I'm curious about. If anybody could illuminate with some answers, that would be helpful.
I don't think we'll.
We were probably going to say the
I
same
was-
thing.
I was just going to say, I don't think we'll have answers today, but I've already asked Stephanie if she'll reach out to Commander Lip to do a similar setup as we've done in the past, which is we give the board a deadline for submitting questions, and then they will come prepared to answer and talk about kind of what their process looks like. So I asked them if they could make it, sometime in the summer, probably August, if we can get them to come in and answer some questions.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. I do, I'm just like, is there also somewhere we can find this information online or something? Because we have asked, maybe not the exact question that I just laid out there, or set of questions I've laid out there, but we've asked variations of that question for the probably last 2 years. I don't know, perhaps, right? Maybe, and we're just not really getting answers there. That's what it seems. I mean, it actually seems like.
We've asked them formally. I think we've asked them out into the ether. And then to an extent, when our questions are things that we could get answered with probably less specificity, like we've asked the chief things about their process, and she told us. I think the more we learn, the more we know what other questions to ask, and that I think we're trying to do. So.
I would add, too, that when we initially asked, CPD was still building out their internal process as well. And I think they have it to more of a formalized process where if we did ask them to come in and explain, what happens once the reports get to them or the complaints get to them, then they can provide probably a better, broader overview. Because I do know they have a process, though, and it actually passes through several people to review those cases.
So so I just want to be clarity, and maybe there's a specific question here. What's the difference between a review and investigation, or what level of review is expected, or when it reaches, it seems, or it could reach a level of them actually doing their own investigation, which they cannot do per the secret.
They can't.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it seems like they've got some some process that they are confident enough in to disagree with maybe a third of those findings from a full investigation. Two-thirds of a full investigation that the Department Inspector General has investigated. And through their thorough review process, not an investigation, they are confident that review warrants a departure from the investigation.
Well, I don't know if we can speak for them. I think the best thing would be to have them come in and explain to us what it is that they do.
They're confident in that decision.
Well, I mean, they probably are, but, I think they should come in and explain what that process is.
Would love that.
Speculate all day, but I think you're correct. I think it's better to hear from them, and that way we can ask the questions that we can answer.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay, so I'd like a question to the board. As far as this case is concerned, it's a little bit more than officers not turning on their BWCs. It's a little bit more egregious. Should we say something else, or just, I agree with, our subcommittee agrees with the IG's findings, but it's like I want to more than agree. But I guess it comes back to Kyle's question. It's what's going to happen next, and we just don't know. So, is there something we should say, like we really agree?
Strenuously agree?
Yeah.
You strenuously
There you go.
agree?
I should ask you. Is there something else we can
Right,
say?
you strenuously agree.
Strenuously agree.
I would just maybe put a note at top asking if it can be prioritized, given that you believe that it's an egregious.
Okay,
Given the number of offenses and the egregious behavior alleged, that you think it should be prioritized for review.
Because so egregious. Okay, so is that what I should say when I?
Well, I don't know how they're submitted. They're submitted electronically, so if there's, in the title of the email, maybe urgent or something to that effect to draw attention.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I think Stephanie can add a sentence to
The memo.
The board
'cause it's a
respectfully
memo that-
requests that this receive prioritized review because of the egregious nature of the allegations, something to that
Okay,
effect.
that's a good idea. Thank you. All right. Done.
Us without AI.
All right, that's good. That makes me feel better. All right. 2024-1719. This is a misconduct allegation. Complaint stemmed from a report of an attempted assault where the complainant was the alleged victim. The complainant said the officer downplayed her assault and showed no awareness of a trauma-informed approach. And two, the officer suggested the alleged suspect in her assault could have been joking. The DIG's investigation consists of an interview with the complainant, an interview of a civilian witness, interview of the focus officer, review of BWC, review of police report from the incident, review of CAD, review of CPD division directives. The investigation found there was no evidence to suggest that the focus officer downplayed the complainant's alleged assault or that the officer did not have a trauma-informed approach. The officer followed appropriate CPD policies and procedures. The DIG recommended that this allegation be closed as unfounded. As to number two, the investigation found that the officer did say the alleged suspect in the assault could have been trying to be funny. The officer explained that she was attempting to explain the concept of intent to the complainant. During the course of the officer's explanation of intent, the officer stated, quotes, he could have just been dicking around. You know what I'm saying. Believe it or not, some people think stuff like that's funny. Other people have intentions. Some people have no intentions. I mean, it's just hard to predict when he didn't say anything, close quotes. The explanation of the concept of intent was not outside of CPD policy or procedure. However, the officer's use of the word dicking around to the alleged victim in an assault would be considered unprofessional. Therefore, the Columbus DIG recommends allegation 2 be closed as sustained. And we did review and we do agree with the findings of the Inspector General. All right, now, as to case number, oh, we have a question?
Oh, to add before you close, one of the cases, and this is going to be case 24-1525, and my apologies if you did not get the updated report. When we closed the complaint, which we closed it on January the 17th, we had not received the use of force report, and we always go out and try to get that information. We did receive the use of force report, and we did an updated report on January the 23rd. I thought we had forwarded to the board. We may not, and so therefore we removed the sustained for not doing the use of force report because it was done, and we did check the date, and it was done, you know, within the policy and procedure. So,
okay, so the officer did do it within the time period?
yes.
Okay, so then allegation number 2 would that be unfounded then, rather than sustained?
We actually have a totally new report that we revised, and we removed that.
You will delete the DIG's finding. Like, that's what they would have gotten rid of.
Yeah.
Because it was a DIG find. It was an additional allegation of the DIG, so that is no longer.
So get rid of it.
Sustained.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
Thank you.
I got it. Thank you. Okay, all right, thank you. As to 2024-1276, we move to accept the findings. I'm just going to read all of them. We move to accept the findings of the Inspector General as to case number 2024-1276, 2024-1432, 2024-1525, 2024-1547, 2024-1559, 2025-1588, 2024-1719. And then as to case number 2025-1588, there are 5 allegations of the Inspector General. Do I need to read those?
No.
No.
You can just say that they were all sustained.
Yeah, they
You
were
wanna move-
all sustained, and we move to accept those. And as to case number 2024-1432, the Inspector General had an allegation, and we accept that, and that was, let's see, that was sustained, and we also accept that. We move to accept all of these allegations at this time.
Okay. Starting first with the motions on the open cases as originally alleged. May I have a second, please? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hands. Motion's carry. Thank you. Turning next to the motions on the additional allegations added by the IG. May I have a second, please? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hands. Motion's carry. Thank you. All right, at this point, we will take a 6-minute break. We'll come back at 4:20. Thank you. All right, we are reconvened. So first, we'll start with nominations for chair and vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Chair Burns for chair and Dr. Jones for vice chair.
I move that the nominations be closed on those two.
Well, I will accept my nomination. Dr. Jones, will you accept your
I'll
nomination?
accept my nomination.
All right.
So much from Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay, yep. All right.
Wait to do the vote. We can just do that now. I mean, y'all in the chair.
I mean, technically, we were going to vote in April. Are there any other nominations? Okay. All right,
We'll vote at the community meeting. How about that?
we can do that.
Yeah, no, we can do it.
At our community board meeting? All right, now I'm going to open the floor. I know we have some thoughts about additional recommendations that we would like to make, so I will turn it over to Board Member Nathan.
Yes. I'm concerned that the way that that I won't speak for others, that I assumed the recommendation for a policy change regarding body cams was going to be carried out is not the way it's being carried out. That is, our concern, my concern was that we have special duty officers empowered to use deadly force, but they were not required to wear body cams. My concern is that we're going to have an incident in which deadly force is used, there will be no body cam evidence, and that will be an explosive situation for our city. As a result of that, we continue to recommend that we require body cams for special duty officers. My understanding was that our request was granted. That is, that we're requiring special body cams for special duty officers. That is not what happened. Body cams are made available. They're not mandated, and I'm told two things. Number one, we didn't buy enough body cams, and officers don't want to pick up the body cams unless they're paid to pick them up. So I would like to recommend a change in policy so that the initial issue is addressed by the Columbus Police Department. Having body cams available if you wish is not what we were, that it doesn't meet the need. And I have no idea if they're keeping any kind of records of what percentage of special duty officers are currently wearing body cams. But since it's not a requirement, I assume that nobody's keeping records. It might not be true, but I'm concerned that we don't even have any data of, has this reduced the problem to 50%, or is it still at 95% and a few officers choose to wear them, or, if they can pick up the body cam. So I'd like to continue to pursue this. So, yeah.
I was going to say, I think that's a very valid point. I think there definitely is a need for more body cams, and because, well, we know research has consistently shown that body cams benefit both officers as well as the community, and it helps to provide some sort of perspective over incidences that happen, especially high-profile incidents or incidents that are even called into question. And so I think, city council, make sure, we're going on the record to say this, or whomever the powers might be, that some more funds are allocated for the purchase of additional body cams. And I think if we are looking at, ensuring that our officers are as transparent as they can be, especially for our community, if we want to build community trust, and I think then that is an investment that needs to be made.
And there needs to be funds set aside if the issue is that officers simply won't pick up the body cams unless they're paid to pick them up. That funds need to be set aside for that purpose, but the bottom line is, our board recommendation was to mandate the use of body cams for special duty officers, not to simply have them available if they're able to get them, so.
So what is changing now? Are we just saying, let's follow up on that, or what's the idea here moving forward?
I think the motion is that our policy recommendation would be mandating the BWCs for special duty. And I'd have to go back and look at our initial recommendation. I don't know if we said require or we did not.
You did not. I would, so I will say, that's going to be a challenge as it currently stands to mandate body cameras on special duty officers because there are not enough body cams to be distributed to all of the officers who are on special duty. So it produces an inequity where some officers may have them, some officers don't, just because there's not enough to distribute to everyone. And so, in a perfect world, I would say, that's a good recommendation. We can mandate it if we have enough, which is why I said we need more funds to purchase more body cams.
Well, I mean, I think, I do think, though, like this broader recommendation, mandate, require, consider, have available, I mean, ultimately, this is a decision that CPD is going to make one way or another. I don't, whether we say the word mandate or not, it doesn't have any bearing on what they choose to do, but I'm open to.
Well, no, that's correct.
Yeah.
But I mean, to your point as well, you could see what the original language was, see whether you whether you were clear in that and they just twisted it or misinterpreted it, and then you could provide a follow-up clarification to let them know your position. If you feel like the initial language did not adequately communicate what the board's thinking was, then you can also provide a follow-up to that. But you could also recommend, given the financial constraints, you recommend a phase-in, over time. Maybe it's 30% of special duty through the end of this year, and then 50% of special duty through midway of next year. A phase-in to allow them to secure funds and get everyone covered, basically. It's an option.
Yeah, I like this idea of, I like that idea. I also like this idea of kind of elevating it a little bit for council's attention and, the mayor's attention in terms of that this is a priority of the board. We've navigated through reasons. Finance is a big piece here, resource allocation. But yeah, I like that version of maybe kind of making this our follow-up of it. But
Yeah, the board's not prohibited from seeking out other stakeholders to make its initiatives progress in a faster and more efficient ways.
like a virtual
Do that.
subcommittee meeting, yeah, that'd be great. Okay.
Pull up, and our original recommendation was to recommend a review and change to the policy regarding officers working special duty to wear body-worn cameras. So could we be more forceful in our language? Yes. So I think maybe we have an opportunity to make two recommendations here. One related to whether it's a phase-in of mandating. Second, related to requesting that there be additional budget funds allocated
Yeah, I think
for
this is
that purpose.
Yeah, I think it's a conversation for stakeholders, right? Safety director, mayor. I mean, we can initiate that this has been a, part of the patterns or practices that have come up, and this is one of those policy recommendations that we would make.
Just to piggyback on that, and not to compound the problem, but I know we've had also some instances in the last year of detectives and other sworn personnel not having cameras either. And I think we should just take it one step farther. Any sworn personnel that has interaction with the public should have a camera. That should be the ultimate goal, not just special duty, but everybody. Any sworn officer.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I believe when Ms. Ross was here, that issue had come up, and I think Ms. Ross articulated this, and I kind of echoed her sentiments that there needs to be some care and caution with requiring it across all areas of sworn personnel. Detectives and other types of sections of the police do undercover work that would definitely be compromised by the use of body-worn cameras and could also affect their safety as well. So that should definitely, instead of just doing blanket, you definitely want to be mindful of that.
Absolutely.
So who would like to put some meat to the bones of those two motions for language?
Yeah, well, I could,
Yeah. I
you
mean,
know,
you
put something.
know, yeah.
Can put something together. I'm not sure I understand the second, I understand my motion. I don't understand what we were,
So I think the funding piece is the part that has to be whether we can make a recommendation, and this is my ignorance of the city budget process for CPD. Like, I know what state budget processes are, and the way it typically works is agency directors go and ask another body to allocate funding, and then those directors then have some discretion as to where that funding goes. So I don't know if we want to.
up to the folks who are responsible for securing the funding. We're making a recommendation, we're just sitting in we have limited, sphere.
It's
Yeah,
done,
yeah,
you know.
for
yeah.
this year. All that money's been allocated.
Yeah, so,
And so is that a
so,
two-year cycle? Because I think that matters
No,
for.
every year.
Just 1 year? Okay.
This guy.
The reason why I think that's important is if our language about mandation is going to be a phase-in, then I think we need to know where the budget falls so that we know what we're asking for.
yeah, I mean, in terms of phase-in or how they want, that is, that goes beyond what I would want to be, gauged in that level of detail. I just want us to end at, that we understand what the objective is. The objective is to get special duty officers to wear body-worn cameras. How that,
If you want to keep it more broad too, you could just say, come up with a time frame. Recommend within the next year, or 18 months, that there be some sort of plan from CPD to phase in special duty,
Yes.
body-worn cameras for all special duty officers. That gives them the ability on the back end to then figure out the funding
Yeah, yeah.
model and, the
Yeah,
phase-in
I don't, I mean,
determinations.
I don't have to, yeah.
But
I
it could
don't
be
know
phrased in
anything
that
about
manner.
I mean, yeah, I think this is the challenge with the policy recommendation aspects, right? Because there are other aspects that go into this, and so I'm just trying to think about ways that we maybe as, when we spend more time as a review committee, or when we think about our policy now that several years in with this process, we can think about some sort of working groups so that these recommendations can actually be implemented, right? Because I think it's one thing, we make a recommendation, then the next month we come back and say we're going to look into it, and they follow up. But I do think there are some things that could be actively moved on. If council were aware, or if the mayor's office or public safety director, maybe it's compiled as a report of some sort. But, I don't know if you want to make a motion of just saying a requirement for body-worn cameras for special duty officers or not.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
my motion, but,
I'll second.
okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second that body-worn cameras be required for all special duty officers.
Second.
Okay, we've got the second. Any other questions, modifications, Ms. Jackson? No, okay. All in favor, please raise your hands. All right, motion carries. All right, anything else for the good of the order?
I will just like to bring up a little bit of a news that you all will probably hear about sometime today, and that is pertaining to a case that we have seen, cases involving a particular officer making social media posts. He has been terminated, and the safety director did uphold the decision for his termination. And so I will say that, going back to the impact of the work that we do, that is another clear example of, we received a complaint, the IG did an investigation, we then agreed with the outcome of that investigation. It was then sent over to CPD, and then they made a decision. And I want to say also that decision was based on the fact that the particular officer illegally downloaded over 17 videos, body-worn camera videos, for his personal use on his YouTube as well as other social media pages. And I think it is very, very important to recognize, as much as officers enforce the law, they should also follow the laws, policies, and rules and regulations that are set forth. And so I just want to commend Chief Bryant, as First Assistant Chief Potts, Safety Director Kate Bishotti in that decision. And so I just wanted to make sure everybody on the board was also aware of the news that just came out.
Thank you, Dr. Jones.
Chair Burns, I also want to mention something. I emailed you maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago about the possibility for virtual meetings for either the board as a whole or committees. That legislation, House Bill 257, will become effective, I believe, April 9th. As of right now, I have not heard anything about City Council making any kind of decisions or enacting any kind of legislation to modify or tighten the state rule. And so, again, I just want to keep it on your radar that at some point, if the board has an interest in having those committee meetings be virtual and/or the board meetings be virtual, there are some hoops, if you will, that need to be jumped through. A policy needs to be created. That policy will need to be crafted and voted on by the board. There's some tedious aspects to it. I've read through House Bill 257 a few times now, and I'm obviously happy to help the board craft that policy to make sure we've kind of crossed all our Ts and dotted all of our Is. One of the main components, though, I think the board needs to be mindful of is there needs to be an ability for the public to see and to hear and to participate in those open meetings. And I know a lot of these committee meetings are taking place, I'm guessing, at libraries or public venues where there may not be the technology to do that. I'm not going to advocate for someone to use their own laptop or cell phone for potential hosting of those types of meetings. So we need to figure out what the infrastructure will look like in terms of being able to, a platform to host those meetings virtually if committees wish to do that, so that the public is properly noticed, can hear and to see and participate if they want to. So just things to be mindful of. Maybe technologically challenging, but I'm happy to help you work through it if that's what you want to do.
Nope, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? We can end on 2 pieces of positive news if no one has anything else. No? All right. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hands. Motion adjourned. Thank you all.